Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namo Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktāya Tadbhaktāya Namo Namo Śrī Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Advaita Gadadhara Śrivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Kṛṣṇa Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Kṛṣṇa. Thank you so much for joining. We will read Bhagavad Gita from where we paused yesterday. That is, we'll begin the third chapter. And here, text number 1 onwards. We'll read the verse in the translation. Yesterday, if you want to read, you can also read 10 verses each, and then next person can read. Karma Yoga, chapter 3. Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Cheta Karmanaste Mata Buddhe Janardana Tatkim Karmani Ghore Mam Niyojyasi Keshava. Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Vyamishreneva vakyena buddhim mohayashiva me tadekam vada nishchitya yena shreyoham apunyam. Translation: My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokasmin Dvividha Nishta Pura Prokta Maya Nagha Jnana Yogena Sankhyana Karma Yogena Yoginam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Na karmanam anarambhan nishkarmyan purusho shnute na cha sannyasana deva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Nahi kaschit shanam api jato tishtati akarmakrit karyate hya avasa karma sarva prakriti jargunai. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran Indriyartham vimudhatma mithyachara sauchyate. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Yastavindriyani manasa niyam yaram Yarabhate Arjuna Karmindriyai Karma Yogam Asakta Sa Vishishyate. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by mind and begins Karma Yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior. Nityaṁ kuru karmatvam karma jyayo hya akarmanaha Sharirāyatrapi chate na prasiddhyet akarmanaha. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. Yagyat yagyarthat karmanonyatra loko yam karma bandhanah tad artham karma kaunteya mukta sanga samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage. Sayagya praja shrishva puro vacha prajapatihi anena prasavishyedhvam esha vostav ishtakamadhuk. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with the sacrifices for Vishnu and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily, achieving liberation." If anyone wants to read from 11 to 20.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. May I please read?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mataji. Yes, please, Mataji. You can read.
Devan bhavaya tanena te deva bhavyayantu vaha parasparam bhavyayanta shreya param avapyastaha. Translation: the demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you, and thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva dashyante yatna bhavita teir dattan aparadhyayibhyo yo bhunakte stena evasa. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Yatna shishtasino santo muchyante sarvakilbishe pujante te tvam agham papa ye pachanti atma karanat. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Anad bhavanti bhutani parajanyad anna sambhava yajnad bhavati parajanyo yajna karma samudbhava. All living bodies subsist on food grains which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Karma brahmo bhavam vidhi brahmakshara sammudha bhavam tasmat sarvagatam brahma Nityaṁ yadne pratishtitam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Evam pravartitam chakram nanu vartayati haya aghayur indriya ramo mogham partha sajivati. My dear Arjun, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. Such a person lives in vain. Yes, tva atma ratir eva syad, atma triptascha manava, atmane eva cha santushtasta tasya karyam na vidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him, there is no duty. Naiva tasya kritenartho na kritenaha kaschana na chasya sarvabhuteshu kaschit artha vyaspashraya. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Tasmat asakta satatam karyam karma samchara asakto ya acharam karma param apnoti purushaha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Karmana eva hi samshiddhim ashtita janaka daya loka sangraham evapi sampashayan kartum arhasi. Kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Srinika Mataji, you want to?
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Text 21. Yad yad acharati shreshthastad evetaro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. 22. Name prarthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nana vaptam avaptavyam vartayeva cha karmani. O son of Pruta, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. 23. यदि हि अहं न वर्तेयं जात कर्मण्य अतन्द्रितः मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वशः. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. 24. Utsideyur ime loka na kuryam karma chedaham sankarasya cha kartasyam upahanyam ima prajaha. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. Sakta karmani avidvamso yata kurvanti bharata kuryat vidvams tata saktas chikurshur loka sangraham. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. 26. Na buddhibhedam janayet agnanam karma sanginam josayet sarva karmani vidvan yukta samacharam. So as not to disturb the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. 27. प्रकृते क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्काराविमूढात्मा कर्ताहम् इति मन्यते. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of all activities that are inactually carried out by the three modes of material nature. 28. तत्त्ववित्तु महाबाहो गुणकर्माभिभागयो गुणगुणेषु वर्तन्त इति मत्वा न सज्जते. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O Nityaṁ, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. 29. प्रकृतेर्गुणसम्मूढः सञ्जन्ते गुणकर्मसु तान् अकृत्स्न विदो मन्धान् कृष्णविन्न विचाल्यते. Bewildered by the modes of the material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached, but the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. 30. मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्मचेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वर. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrender all your work unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desire for profit, with no claim to proprietorship, and free from lethargy. Fight. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Anyone else wants to read text 31 onwards?
Should I?
Sure, please, Mataji.
Text number 31. Ye me matam idam nityam anutese shantita manavaha shraddhavanto nasuyanto musayanti titi karamvi. Translation. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from my bondage of fruitive actions. Hare Krishna. Text number 32. Yeta itad abhushanto manutishintanti me matam sarva jnana vibhutam vidhinastan eshe nashtan chetasya. Translation. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings, them regularly are to be considered bereft of all and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. Text number 33. Sadresham cheshtate swasaha prakrita jnanavanapi prakriti yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Translation. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature for everyone follows the the nature acquired from the three modes. What can repression according? What can repression accomplish? Hare Kṛṣṇa. Text number 34. Indraya sarthe rag dvesho vyavastho toranam vashama gachanto hasse pari panthenu. Translation. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Text number 35. Shreyan svaha dharmo viguna par dharmo tasva nishtata swadharma nidhanam shre par dharmo bhāgavata-sevayā. Translation. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties even though faultily than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties. Or to follow another path is dangerous. Text number 36. Arjuna uvasaha ata kina prayakatu yam papam karati purushaha anichana api varshanaha balat ive nivojataha. Translation. Arjuna said, O descendant of Varsni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Shri Bhagavano Vachaha Kam Esh Krodh Esh Roj Guna Samruddhava Bhashano Mahapama Vidhene Me Varina Maha. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, which is all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Dharmene vriteha vahiram dharsho malanah cha yatho laban beto garbhasthatha tene damavritam. Translation. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Text number 39. Avartam jnanam eten jnaninah nityaverinaha kama rupen konteha dosha purena nala nachaha. Translation. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness become covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Text number 40. Indrayani manu buddhi rasad adhi ishtana muchate etirvaha moha bhayatesha jnanam vardaha dahinim. Translation: the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, the lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Back to you, Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Just one or two verses left in this chapter and completed. Tasmatvam indriyani adau niyama bharatarshava papamanam prajahiyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Indriyani parani ahur indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhe yo buddhe paratastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses. The intelligence is higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. To chapter 4, Jnana Yoga, transcendental knowledge. Yes, before we want to read.
So, Hare Kṛṣṇa devotees, Naro Pranam, all wishes to Śrī Prabhupada. So, text 1. Sivan uvacha imam vivasate yogam praktabano aham abhayam vivashan manabe praho monu riksha kabe abravit. The person of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vibhushan. And Vibhushan instructed to Monu, the father of mankind. And Monu in turn instructed it to Ikshaku. Text 2. Ebang parampara praptam imang rajasya vidu so kalenho mahata yogo nasto parantapo. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. So ebayang mayate addo jogo prakto puratanu bhakto shive shakha cheti rasanghi atad utpamam. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Text 4. Aparang bhavato janmo parang janmo vivasyato katho metad bijaniyang tamo ado praktaman iti. Arjuna said, the sun god Vibhushan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Text 5. Bohuni me betitani jarvani tavacha Arjuna tanuhang vedo sarvani natang vetho parantapo. The person of Godhead said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Text 6. Ajopi shannavoy atma bhutanam ishvara opi shan prakriting shamo dishthayo shambhavame atma mayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Text 7. Jada jada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharato obuthanamo adharmasya tadatmanam sijani maham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, a predominant rise of irreligion at that time, I descend myself. Text 8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya duskritam dharma samstapana arthayo sambhavani juge juge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. Text 9. Janma karma chame dibbang ebong je vyakti tattata tekta dehang punarjanma noiti mamiti so arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Text 10. Vitarago bhayo proda manmaya mamo upasrita bhavo ganata posha puta madbhavam agata. Being freed from attachment and fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attain transcendental love for me. Back to Guruji. Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Thank you, Prabhu. Prem Sankirtan Prabhu, you want to read next 10 verses? So there, Prabhu.
Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, Prabhu.
Hare Kṛṣṇa Prabhu, Hare Kṛṣṇa devotees, Dandavat from Jai Śrīla Prabhupada. Text 11. Je jathamam prapaddante tangs tataiva bhajamyaham mama vartanu vartante manushya partha sarvasyaha. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. O son of Pritha. Text 12. Kankshanta karmanam siddhim jajanta iha devata shipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Man in this world desires success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, man get results from fruitive work in this world. Text 13. Chaturvarna maya srishtam guna karma vibhagasha tosya kartaram apimam vidhi akartaram abhayam. According to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Text 14. Namam karmani limpanti, name karma phales priha, itimam jo abhijanati, karma bhi nasha bhadhyate. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Text 15. Evam gyatta kritam karma purber api mumukshubhi kuru karmaiva tasmattam purbe purvataram kritam. All the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. Text 16. Kim karma kim akarma meti kabaya api atra mohita tatte karma prabhakshami jajagatta mokshase ashubhat. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. Text 17. Karmana api buddhaibam cha vikarmana akarmanascha buddhaibam ghana karmanagati gahana karmanagati. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Text 18. Karmani akarmaja pushyat akarmani cha karmaja Sabuddhiman manusyeshu sajukta Krishna karma krit. One who sees inaction in action and action in action is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Text 19. Joshya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa bodhita jnana agni dhagta karmanam tam ahu panditam buddha. Translation. One is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Text 20. Takta karma phala sangam nitya tripta nirashraya karmani abhipravritta api naiva kinchit karoti sha. Translation. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Prabhu, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Okay, next, anyone wants to read?
Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Please, Mataji.
Text 21. Nirashiryata chittatma taktya sarva parigraha sariram kevalam karma kurvan napnoti kilvisham. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Text 22. Yadrachalava santushta dvandvatito vimatsaraha samasidva asiddhaucha kridvapina nivadhayate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Text 23. Gata sangasya muktasya jnanan vasthita chitasaha yagna yacharahata karma samagram pravilyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Text 24. Brahmarpanam brahmahavir brahmagnau brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Text 25. Daivam iva pare yagnam yogi naha parupasate brahmagnav apare yagnam yagne naivo pajuhavati. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Text 26. Srotradinindriyani anya samyamagnishu juhuvati sabdadin vishayan anya indriyagnishu juhvati. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Text 27. Sarvanin indriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samayama yogagna juhvati jnana dipite. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Text 28. Drabhya yagna stapo yagna yoga yagna statha pare swadhyaya jnana yagnascha yata yaha samsita brataha. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Text 29. Apane juhvati pranam prane panam tatha pare pranapana gati rudva pranayama parayanaha apare nyataharaha pranan pranesu juhvati. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offered the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Text 30. Sarvepi ete yagna vido yagna shapita kalmashaha yagna shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. Hare Krishna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mataji. Ms. Dirgo, you want to read?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna devotees and pranam goes to Sri. Nayam lokasti ayagnasya kutonyaha Kuru Sattama. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. When what then of the next? Evam bahu vidhayagna vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidhitan sarvan evam gnatva vimokshase. All these different types of sacrifices are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Sriyandravya Mayadyagna Gnana Yagna Parantapa Sarvam Karma Kilam Partha Gnane Parisamyapate. Translation. O chastiser of enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material presence. After all, O son of Partha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. 34. Tatvidhi pranipadena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te gnanam gnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn by the truth by approaching the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Yajnanana para puranmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutena ase asisani drakshasye atmane atomaye. Having obtained real knowledge from the self-realized souls, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, they are mine. Api chadasi papebhya sarvebhya papakrittama sarvam gnana pala plave nivai vijnam vignam santiras syasi. Even if you are concerned to be most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. Yathai dhamsi samidhognir bhasmasat kruterchana gnana sarva karmani bhasmasat kurute tata. As the blazing fire turns firewood into ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions of material activities. Nahi gnanena sadrasam pavitram iha vidyate tam swayam yoga samsiddha kalena mani vindati. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who knows, who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service, enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Himself in course. Shraddhava labhate gnanam tatpara samyutetriya gnanam ladva param santim achire nagacchati. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdue his sense is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Then Pranam.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Last verses I'll complete and go to the next chapter. Agyascha shraddhadanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samshayatmanaha. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchinna samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibadhnanti dhananjaya. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated actually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. Tasmad agyana sambhutam pritham jnana sinatmanaha chitvinam samshayam yogam atishtito tishta bharata. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge, armed with yoga. O Bharata, stand and fight. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. So we'll now move to chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness. You can't go and to read the first 10 verses.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandapranam. Text 1. Arjuna Uvacha Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna Punaryogam cha shamshasi Yaksheya etayor ekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam.
Arjuna said, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work. And then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sanyasa Karma Yogascha Nishresh Yasa Karav Ubhav Tayostu Karma Sanyasat Karma Yogo Vivishyate. The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Bhyeya sa nitya sannyasi yona dveshi na kanshati nidvando hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all rivalities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. Sankhya Yoga Pratatbala Pravadhanti na panditaha ekam api astitha samyak ubayor vindyate phalam.
Only the ignorant speak of devotional service. Karma yoga has been different from the analytical study of the material world.
Sankhya.
Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both.
Yat Sankhya prapyate stanam pradyoger api gamyate ekam sankhya cha yogam cha yah pashyati na pashyati.
Only one who knows that the position reached by means the analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level sees things as they are.
Sannyasastu mahabaho dukkam aptum ayogatha yoga yukto mune brahma na chirina digachyati.
Merely renouncing all activities, not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay.
Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarva bhutatma kurvan api na lipyate.
One who works in devotional, who is pure soul and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled.
Naiva kinchit karo mithi yukto manyeta tattvavid pashyan shrinvan sparshan jikhalan ashan gachan swapan swayan pralapan visrajan grihnan unmishan nimishan api indriyani indriyateshu vartanta iti dharayan. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all, because while speaking, evacuating, receiving or opening or closing his eyes, he only knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. Brahmani ataya karmani sangam tatva karoti ya Lipyate na sa papena Padmapatram ivam vasha. One who performs his duties without attachment, surrendering the results onto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water.
Text 11. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Kayena manasa buddhiya kevalir indriyai api yogina karma kurvanti sangam tyaktvatma shuddhaye. Translation. The yogis abandoning attachments act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with senses, only for the purpose of purification. Yukta karma phalam tyaktva shantim apnoti naistitikim ayukta kama karena phale sakto nibadhyate. The steadily devoted souls attain unalterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Karmani manasa samsayastite sukha vasi nava dvare puritehi naiva kurvan na karyan. Translation. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Na kritvam na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu na karma phalam samyogam swabhas vastu pravartate. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of nature. Na date kasyachit papam na chaiva sukritam vibuduha ajnane vratam jnanam tena muhyati janatvaha. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Jnanina tad ajnanam yesham nastitham atmanaha tesham aditya vajnanam prakashayati tat param. When, however, one is entangled with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Tad buddhayas tad atmanas tan nistitas tad parayanaha gacchantya apnor avritam jnanina nirduta kalmashaha. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge all are fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmine Gavi Hastine Shuni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshinaha. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and a gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, outcast. Ihaivatayar jitah sargo yesham samye stititham manaha nirodosam hisam samamaha brahma tasmad brahmani te stitaha. Those whose minds are established in the sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahmans. Na praharshya priyam prapya no vijit prapya chai priyam stithair buddhir asamudho brahmanisitaha. Translation: a person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant nor lament upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the signs of God, is already situated in transcendence. We can continue, Prabhuji.
Yes, Ravi Prabhuji, you want to read?
Yes, Prabhu, Hare Kṛṣṇa. Bahye sparsheshva astatma vidanti atmani yat sukham sah brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashunnate. Prabhuji, scroll it up, please. I'm using my phone. Translation: such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Text 22. Ye hi sam asprasaja bhoga dukha yoniya evate adyantavantah kaunteya nate shuramte buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the source of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Text 23. Shaknoti heva yah shodhum praka sharira vimokshanaat काम क्रोध उद्भव गवम वेगम सयुक्तः. Before giving up the present body, if one is able to tolerate the
urges of
urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. Text 24. Yo ananta sukhanantar aramastatha antar jyotir eva yah sa yogi brahma nirvanam brahmo bhuto digachati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Text 25. Labhante brahma nirvana mrishyah china kalmashaha china dvedhaya tatmanah sarva bhuta hiterataha. Translation. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Text 26. Kama krodha vimuktanam yatinam yata chetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Text 27-28. Sparshan kirtva bahir bhayam chakshusam chaivantare bhruvoho prana panau samau kirtva nasha bhayantara charinau. Yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayanaha vigate cha bhaya krodho ya sada mukta eva saha. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, become free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in the state is certainly liberated. Text 29. Bhoktaram yagatapsam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gatva mam shantim rikshati. A person is full conscious of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So we come to chapter 6 now, which is Dhyana Yoga. Mr. Jayamataji, you want to read?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna devotees, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Śrīla Prabhupada. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha
anasrita karma phalam karjam karma karoti ya shasannashi cha yogi chana niragrino chakriya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Jang Shannashamiti Prahuryogam Tang Vidhi Pandava Na Hangshanasta Shankalpo Yogi Bhavati Kashchanam. What is called renunciation? You should know, to be the same as yoga or linking oneself with the Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless one renounces the desire for sense gratification. Text 3. Arurukha mune yogam karma karana muchyate yogarura shatasaiva samah karana muchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Yada hi indriyartheshu na karma shanuyujyate sarva sankalpa sannashi yogarurasta yujyate. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for the sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Uddhare tana natmanam ma vasadayat attaiva hatmana bandhurattaiva ripurattanam. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Bandhur atmanastasya jenataiva batmana jita anatanastu shatrutte vartetataiva shatrubat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitashna shukha dukkheshu tatha manapamanaya. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached. For he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Gano Biggano Triptatta Kutastha Bijitendriya Yukto Itu Uchyate Yogi Shama Lashtasya Kanchanam. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Shurin Matra Yudashino Madhasto Desha Bandhushu Sadhushu Oshi Papeshu Shamabuddhi Vishishyate. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest old wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral mediators, the envious friends and enemies, the pious, and the sinners, all with an equal mind. Yogi junjita shatatatmatmanang rahushi sthita ekaki jata chittatta nirashira parigraha. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Anyone who has not yet read and wants to read? So Shilpa Mataji, Vijaya Mataji.
Prabhuji, I might need help with Sanskrit.
Sanskrit.
Okay, I can read Sanskrit.
Okay, yeah, you can do, please.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Mataji.
Text 11 and 12. Sucho deshe pratishthapya sthiramasan atmanah natyuchitam nati nityam chaila jina kusotaram tatra ekagramana krutva yata chitendriya yakriya upavisasyane yujya udyogam atma visuddhe.
Translation: to practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. Hare Krishna.
13-14. Samakaya siro grivam dharayanchalam sthirah aprekshya nashikagra swam dishaschana valokyana prasanta atma vigata brahma varigate sthita manasayamya manchito yukta ashita matpara.
Translation: one should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose, thus with an unagitated, subdued mind devoid of fear, completely free from sex life. One should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. Hare Krishna.
Text 15. Yujanevam sada atmanam yogi niyatamanasaha shantim nirvana paramam matsasthamam adhigacchati.
Translation: thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence.
Text 16. Natya sratastu yogo asti na che ekanta manasrata na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva cha arjuna.
Translation: there is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi or Arjuna if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough.
Text 17. Yuktahara viharasya yukta chetasya karmashu yukta swapna bodhasya yogo bhavati dukha.
Translation: he who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
Text 18. Yada viniyatam chitam atma nevyavatisthate nispruha sarva kamebhyo yukta ityuchyate tada.
Translation: when the yogi by the practice of yoga disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga.
Text 19. Yatha dipo nivatastho nengate sopama smruta yogino yata chittasya yujyato yogam atmanah.
Translation: as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Hare Krishna.
23. Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra cheva atmanam pashyam atmani tushyati sukham atmatikam yat dudrigrahya mati indriyam veti yatra na chaivayam sthitam chalati tatvatah yam labdha cha param labham manyate nadikam tatah yasmin sthito na dukhena gurunapi vichalyapte tam vidya dukha sayonga viyogam yoga sangnitam.
Translation. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is categorized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all desires arising from material contact. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
You can continue till 30 since we are reading half.
Mataji.
Sanishchayena yuktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamam styaktva sarvan sheshataha manasa vendriya gramam viniyamya samantataha.
Translation. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind.
Shani shani uparame buddhya dhriti grihitaya atma samstham manah kritva na kinchid api chintayet.
Translation. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else.
Yato nischalati manaschanchalam asthiram tatastato niyamaitad atmani eva avasham nayet.
Translation. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self.
Prashanta manasam yenam yoginam sukhamuttamam upaiti shanta rajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham.
Translation. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds.
Yunjanevam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashah sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute.
Translation. Thus, the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the God.
Sarvabhutastham atmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha.
Translation. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere.
Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sa cha me na pranashyati.
Translation. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Krishna, thank you so much. I see Rekha that is also joined. Thank you so much. Would you be interested to read a few verses? And if you need help in Sanskrit, someone can help.
Prabhu, Hare Kṛṣṇa.
I could try to read, Prabhuji.
Please try.
So we are on text 31.
Correct.
Hare Krishna. Sarva bhuta stitam yomam vajatya kattvamasti taha sarvatha vartamanopi sayogi mai vartate. Translation. Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Super Soul, knowing that I and the Super Soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Text 32. Atmo pame na sarvatra samam pashyati yurjun sukham va yadi va dukham sa yogi paramo mataham. Translation. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Text 33. Arjun uvacha yoyam yogas tvaya proktaha samyen madhusudan itasyaham na pashyami chanchalastvastitam stiram. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga while there's a little if you can scroll down just a little bit, please. Yeah, thank you. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Chanchala hi manaha Krishna pramati bala padridam ma tasyaham nigram manye va yoriva sudushakaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Text 35. Śrī Bhagavanuvacha asham shayam mahabaho mano durigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyana cha griyate. Lord Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind
but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Text 36. Asamyatam yatatmana yogo dushprapa iti me matiha vashyatmana tu yatata shakyo vaptumupayataha. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Text 37. Arjun uvacha ayatiha shraddhya yopetu yogachalam tamanasaha aprapya yogasam siddhim Kam gatim Krishna gachati. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who is in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Text 38. Kachino vayavi rashchina bhavati nashyati apratishto mahabaho vimudho brahmana pati. O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? Text 39. Etanme sanishayam Krishna chitu marhasya sheshata twadanya Shanshayasya Chittana Yupapyate. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Text 40. Śrī Bhagavanu Vacha Partha Naiveha Namutra Vinashtasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Krik Sri Dugartim Tata Gachati. Translation. The Supreme Personality of God has said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Thank you, Prabhuji.
So much. Yes, Prema Sankirtan Prabhu, saying something, sir. You want to read the last few verses?
Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa devotees Dandavat Pranam Jai Shri Prabhupada. Text 41. Prapya punna kritam lokan usita sasati sama shuchinam srimatam gehe yoga brashta abhijayate. Translation. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Text 42. Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etadhi dullabhataram loke janma jadidrisham. Or if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. Text 43. Tatra tam buddhi samyagam labhate porvadehikam jatate cha tata bhuiha samsiddho kuru nandana. Translation: on taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. O son of Kuru. Text 44. Purvabhasena tenaiva riyate hi avasha apisha jignashur api jogasya shabda brahmati vartate. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. Text 45. Prayatna jata mana shutu yogi samshuddha kilbisha aneka janma samsiddhas tata jati param gotim. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed off all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. Text 46. Tapasya bhiya adhika yogi Jnani bhiya api mata adhika karma vibhyascha adhika yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Translation: a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Text 47. Yoginamapi sarvesham madgatin antar atmana sraddhabhan bhajate jomam shame yukta tama mata. Translations: and of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, and
Thank you,
thank you
Prabhu.
so much to all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. It's so nicely reading the Bhagavad Gita. We'll continue the rest tomorrow. Bhagavad Gita Upanishad ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Śrīla Gurudev ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindabhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.